G'day everybody and welcome again to another episode of the AustrAlien Podcast. As always, I am your host, TJ Hollis, and with me is the voice of the people, Mr. Sean Mills. Sean, what is the poop, my friend?
Well, TJ, it has been... It feels like we've been forever, but it's nowhere near as long as last time between episodes, but there is so much happened.
Absolutely. I think Australian politics has very much turned on the fireworks for us these last few weeks.
And internationally. You know, sometimes we go, what are we going to talk about this week? And other times we go, thank you, media cycle, we've got a lot. And that is one of these weeks.
Absolutely. It's certainly the latter right now. We've got a bunch of stuff to talk about, so I think we should probably jump straight into it. And first up, this is a nice little part two to one of the topics from last episode where we were discussing Scott Ludlam and Larissa Waters and everybody else having citizenship issues. Well, now we have hit the big one. Mr. Barnaby Joyce himself is a citizen of New Zealand as well as Australia.
Yep. Scary. Actually, before we touch on Barnaby, should make a clarification about the last episode. We were both unsure whether Tony Abbott was a UK citizen or British citizen. Just after we recorded that episode, but probably before we released it, he released the paperwork which proved that he had renounced his citizenship before he stood. So, all clear, Tone.
Hey, good work. You know,
Yeah.
I think that was very important to be clear with.
Yeah, definitely.
Be very transparent with.
Yep.
And I think, I say good work, especially, when we're looking at, some of the people from overseas who are refusing to put out things like tax returns and citizenship documents themselves. It's nice to see that even someone who I personally disagree with on pretty much about everything is willing to do the right thing that way. So...
Yeah. Yep.
You get a round of applause from me for doing that.
Yay, golf clap.
Absolutely.
But Barnaby,
yes.
Barnaby. Wow.
So,
Where do you start with him, eh?
I think, and I don't want this to come across as it's a leading statement or anything, but I would like to quote Barnaby Joyce.
Mm-hmm.
When he was speaking to Patricia Karvelas a few weeks ago about the operation of Section 44 of the Australian Constitution, which is the part that deals with citizenship. And he says, I quote, "I think you have just got to do your homework and make sure you're not a citizen of two countries when you stand for Parliament. Ignorance is not an excuse," end quote.
Yep. Look, I agree with him 95%. I agree with him 95%. I think if you're born in another country, you take Larissa Waters. Yes, she was only 6 weeks old when she came out here, but she was born in another country, so is that possible? That's something you would think to yourself. Should I check that? Should I not check that? Tony Abbott obviously checked that, sorted that out. So
well,
that's
my thought there is that this is something that the party should be doing for everyone as a standard vetting procedure.
Yeah.
I mean...
Barnaby
this isn't just, just the Liberal Party or the National Party, and just as much as this isn't just the Greens or Labor Party or anyone else, but it is up to any party to say, why should we take it on good faith that you say you're not a citizen of someone else? Because that is exactly what these laws are here to stop. They're here to stop people who have overseas ties, who are trying to push the agenda of another country.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And look, we know that Barnaby Joyce isn't doing it just as much as we knew that Larissa Waters and Scott Ludlam weren't doing it either. They weren't trying to push another country's agenda.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you are coming into politics in Australia with the plan to push the agenda of another nation, you're not going to be telling people, are you?
No, absolutely not.
And that is absolutely why either the parties and or the Electoral Commission themselves should be checking everybody. They should be vetting everybody.
Okay, so I've got a question with regards to Barnaby, because I agree with you. I think the Electoral Commission should look into it. The question with regards to Barnaby is, what do they check that against? There's no register, there's no roll with Barnaby's name on it saying that he is a New Zealand citizen.
I believe that they need to basically check with every country that he has heritage with. You go back...
So for me, I go back just grandparents alone. I go back Scotland, England, Chile. How can I? My father was born in the UK. My mum was born in Australia. My grandparents were then, some of them go back to like Irish. My great grandparents, then go back to like Irish. How far do you go back?
You go back 3 generations.
Why? Why that random number? I just don't see how somebody who has never asked for citizenship of a country, was not born there, should be expected to think. There's no reasonable reason why Barnaby Joyce would think that he is a citizen of New Zealand.
But the point is, these laws aren't there to catch things like Barnaby Joyce. Like, that's just an added side benefit, is that they go to people like Barnaby Joyce, to Scott Ludlam, and they say, hey guys, you're not actually eligible at the moment. This is what you got to do to become eligible. But what these laws are here for is to stop a malicious foreign power. I mean, yes, Canada, New Zealand, we get along with them great. They are our brothers and sisters overseas. We are very close with both of these countries. But what happens if it's a country that politically we're still a little bit iffy with, you know?
Well, Sam Dastyari was born in Iran.
Exactly.
You know, stuff like that. You know, they're
an
enemy.
What happens if it's China or Syria or Russia? And I'm picking these particular countries purely because in our recent history, that's who we've had contentions with.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That's what these laws are there for. And when I'm suggesting that we push harder, that we have an independent group plus the parties also working as a second line, I'm saying that that's what it's there to catch. And then we get this added side benefits of stopping this embarrassing business with Barnaby Joyce, with Scott Ludlam, with Larissa Waters, with everybody else, with Matt Kavanagh.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be honest, it's embarrassing.
It is. It is completely embarrassing. I think the High Court screwed up 20 years ago when they reinterpreted the law, and that's what the problem is now. We're dealing with the fallout of that. I don't think the High Court got it right. Or if they did get it right, they should have clarified it better.
I believe that, yes, they should have clarified it better, but they should have put something in place to help make sure that it happens.
See, anyway, I don't think the fact that Barnaby is a Kiwi for that reason should disqualify him. That's the other point, which I guess goes against what a literal interpretation of the Constitution is saying. And, the line that Labor's taking with it at the moment is that he should stand down, blah, blah, blah. I don't think he should have to in that situation. He should renounce his citizenship if he finds out that he's got it, but... Which he has. Which he has now, okay, fair enough.
Which he has, however, the line of the law, and this is irrelevant to whether we agree with it or not, but the law must still be followed. The line of the law is that he is supposed to stand down and resign, and his seat go up for a by-election. Now, once he has renounced his New Zealand citizenship, which he has now, he is eligible again to recontest that seat.
I think that we're actually not talking about a law, though. We're talking about the interpretation of the law. And I think that's what the issue is at the moment. And I guess that's why it's before the High Court at the moment with this. And I don't know, is there, 6 or 8 cases now or something like that?
I believe it was, I had somebody tell me the other night that it was up to 30 people could be in between the Senate and the House of Representatives could be...
Yeah, well, I've
affected by this.
Just with the New Zealand one.
Yes, just with New Zealand.
I guess my big problem with it is that I don't like the fact, and I use Barnaby as an example, but it's not actually about Barnaby, it's the principle of the matter. But I don't like the fact that Barnaby is a citizen of a country that he was not born in, and he's only a citizen because of their law.
But it's not just their law, it's both of our law. It's actually part of an agreement that Australia has with New Zealand.
Yeah, but it's not working. The fact that it flows the other way is sort of irrelevant to Barnaby's situation.
Yes, it is irrelevant to his situation, the fact that it flows, but it's not a case of New Zealand deciding. It's not a case of New Zealand deciding that they are now going to put citizenship on Barnaby Joyce. It's a case of Australia and New Zealand got together decades ago and said, this is the rule for citizenships between our two countries.
Yeah.
And this is the rule, Australia and New Zealand together said, this is what we're going to do if you are eligible for dual citizenships.
Look, I think it's a bad rule. At the end of the day, I think it goes against the principle that we don't charge the son for the sin of the father, because that's the same principle involved here.
I mean, that's absolutely fair enough. I actually
So we need to change the rule. We need to change the rule. That's my
Absolutely.
That's my answer. Change the rule, no problems.
Yeah, but until then, this is what we're stuck with. This is really what we're stuck with. And to me, what I find very interesting about this, we know what's supposed to happen, but we're waiting on the High Court to decide. Now, if the High Court decides in favour of Barnaby Joyce and says he doesn't have to step down, if the High Court decides that, what happens with Scott Ludlam?
Well, those two resigned, and that's on their own bat.
Yes, they fell on their sword.
They did.
And to be honest,
there's some honourable intention behind that. But if they did that and they didn't need to, we're not actually looking at the law. At the actual specifics in the cases. What we're looking at is in the law. It actually says any reasonable attempt has been made.
Mm-hmm.
So
hence why Sam Dastyari is still technically an Iranian citizen. But he has made every reasonable attempt to have that annulled.
Yes, and there's the Liberal in New South Wales, I can't remember her name, who her paperwork was sent before she nominated, but didn't come back till after the election.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ruling there was that she made a reasonable attempt.
Absolutely.
And that's completely fair enough. So it's these... And it's like this with every law, isn't it? Even, from everything from the Constitution that we're talking about down to, sporting bodies, sports rules. It's always the grey area that bites you in the arse, And that's, I think, where
The question is, do you follow the letter of the law or the spirit of the law?
Yeah. And I guess that's the argument from the Barnaby side in that one. It's not. He's basically saying, from what I understand, it's not reasonable for me to have expected that I was a citizen of a country that I wasn't born in. And whether we agree with that or not, I think that's the argument that
argument he's making.
And I see that point. I don't know whether it's reasonable or not. If the High Court rules against Barnaby, I think that we have I don't know how many million Australians ineligible to run for Parliament, which I think is a stain on our democracy. And that's actually the reason I don't think it will. In the New Zealand case, I'm pretty sure Barnaby's safe. That would be nice to get rid of Barnaby in New Zealand. That'd be good. Anytime he says something now, we can blame the Kiwis.
Your order, my friend. Okay, but for those of us who have been following the sport side of the politics today, there was a very interesting little back and forth between Turnbull and Penny Wong.
Yep.
With basically, so what's happened is it was brought up in Parliament in New Zealand today, and by it I mean Barnaby Joyce's citizenship issue, was brought up in Parliament by a member of the New Zealand Labour Party. Now, the New Zealand Labour Party has nothing to do with the Labor Party of Australia officially.
No. But, party of mutual interest, but that's about the end of it.
Pretty much. And as always, politicians talk, people who work in politics talk, staffers talk. And what has happened is that a staff member out of Penny Wong's office has spoken with a compatriot who worked in an office for a New Zealand Labor Party member. And basically, we've had Malcolm Turnbull has claimed that was why the investigation was brought up in the New Zealand Parliament, is that it was because of that. Now, the manager of opposition business, the New Zealand Internal Affairs Minister Peter Dunn, has come out with a statement saying that it was the Australian media, not questions from the New Zealand Labor Party, that has instigated the investigation into Barnaby Joyce's citizenship issues. I find it very interesting that this has come just so recently after Julie Bishop has made a statement saying that she's going to find it very difficult to work with the New Zealand Parliament. Basically, if the New Zealand Labor government gets in, or the New Zealand Labor Party gets into government, she said it's going to make it very, very difficult for the Australian government to work with the New Zealand government.
Yeah, look, I guess with Julie Bishop, I don't know where... I don't know, I think maybe sometimes I give politicians too much credit, but is it just deflection from the issues of the day, pawn it off onto the Kiwis? But just looking at it from the Kiwi point of view, what interest is that to the New Zealand Parliament for that backbencher to get up and ask a question about citizenship? It's a very odd question to ask unless you're stirring up trouble.
Well, to me it sounds, and this is purely conjecture here, to me it sounds like that's a response to Julie Bishop's claims. Because basically, whether it was intended to be or not, Julie Bishop, as a member of the Australian government, making such a public remark about who New Zealanders should be, making such a public remark that would potentially pressure a New Zealand citizenship to vote one way or the other.
Yeah.
That is messing with a foreign power's sovereignty.
Well, that's what she's claiming that they're doing to us.
But exactly, that's what she's claiming that they're doing to us. But the thing is, she's done it first.
I see.
She made that comment.
No, I don't think she did, mate. I think she did. She said that today. It all came out today, didn't it? No. All the stuff about them asking about Barnaby Joyce and the Penny Wong thing, that all came out today. Yep.
But her original statement about not being able to work with a Labor government in New Zealand came out weeks ago.
Fair enough. But how's that any different than Turnbull and Shorten during the American election campaign saying we'd much rather the Democrats won than Trump? We're going to find it very hard to work with Trump. It
is the same.
Yeah, see,
it is absolutely the same. And it's not something that should be happening.
I think they're allowed to make international statements about our partners. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think anyone in New Zealand even knows who Julie Bishop is to change their opinion about it. It's just media hype.
Fair enough. Well, speaking of media hype,
funny though.
And thank you for the fantastic segue here. But speaking of media hype, we have had a very big situation happen over in Charlottesville.
Yes.
In America.
Yes.
And the media has hyped and dissected this to death. But basically, long story short, there was a protest happening in Charlottesville where groups of the quote-unquote alt-right, but, when I say the alt-right, I mean the serious end of the stick. I'm talking the KKK, and the American Nazis have marched and protested in Charlottesville over the plans to remove a statue of General Robert E. Lee, who was the famous Confederate general and leader of the rebellion.
Leader of the South.
Leader of the South. And, of course, a lot of people came to protest their protest, as is wont to do in America, because while you have free speech, people also have the free speech to protest against what you have to say.
Yep, absolutely.
And admittedly, both sides, there was violence on both sides of this, but one of the members of this alt-right group got into a car and intentionally slammed it into another car to slam that car into people. And 18 people were injured, and one person was killed, a 32-year-old woman. And this, I don't want to spend too long on this, but this can't happen. This isn't right. I mean, I am speechless.
You know what? I don't care which side's right or wrong in it. If you go out in Nazi regalia, then you know, we fought a world war. The entire planet fought against the Nazi regime, and now these idiots are going out there in Nazi paraphernalia and stuff. It is disgusting. And
it is.
I don't even know where to start with these people. They're absolutely disgraceful. Any legitimate points they might have are completely dismissed the second that they stick on a swastika.
Absolutely.
I don't care what their legitimate points are. I wish that, you do that in Germany, you go to jail. You know?
Yeah.
And
there was
a
big deal a number of years ago where the wrestler John Bradshaw Layfield, during a WWE house show in Germany, did the Sieg Heil in the middle of a match.
Yep.
And he got into a lot of trouble.
So
it was only because, you know, a lot of people do believe it was only because he was already out of the country by the time charges were laid that he didn't go to jail.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to extradite him back. But I basically it's an act of terrorism. The guy in the car.
Absolutely.
Normally I'm one to give benefit of the doubt. This situation I'm not. I don't care. I think, you know, throw away the key. It's... Nah.
But where this gets politically interesting, you know, now, like, I absolutely join you in completely decrying these horrendous people. I absolutely join you in that, because Nazism is frankly, it's disgusting.
Absolutely.
It disgusts me that we're still like this. We still have this sort of...
Why in 2017 are we still talking about Nazis as a real thing? You know, it's unbelievable to me. I didn't live through it. My parents didn't live through it. You know, this is going back to my grandparents' time, and I still know that it's disgusting, it's a disgraceful thing, and it's a horrific stain on humanity's history, the whole Nazi thing. And these morons I still think it's... I don't know what they're thinking. I honestly don't know what they're thinking. I just want to say, though, that with regards to the other side, the... What do they call them? The Antifa? Anti-fascist group, the opposing people, the anti-Nazis. I don't think they're completely blameless.
Of course.
And I think they are actually the ones, if you really want to break it down, I think they are the ones who actually incited violence in this whole situation. That said, I don't care that they did, and I don't care what they've done when you've got a Nazi driving a car into a group of people. And none of these leaders of this neo-right Nazi crap has decried it, has said that was wrong. And if you can't see that that is wrong, then I pity you and I pity your children. And all the brainless people that are listening to you.
One set of my grandparents, my Oma and Opa, lived through Nazi occupation in the Netherlands during the Second World War. And they were there as teenagers, and I think one of them was 10, the other one was 14 when it started. And when I hear the stories from their family about what went on. It sickens me to my stomach that people would want to bring this back. But anyway, politically, this is the interesting thing here. I know you probably know exactly what I'm about to say.
I do actually. I was just you're telling me about your grandparents there. Just reminded me of a story. Just reminded me of something in my life when I was probably 10 or 11. My grandmother served in the Second World War. She was in the munition factories and stuff in England and Scotland. So she's of that generation. It's the only reason I'm saying that. When I was 10 or 11, I remember a friend of hers about similar age was just visiting one day, and I have seen on somebody the concentration camp tattoo on her arm, the number and the little Jewish thing that the Germans put on, that the Nazis put on. And it wasn't until years later that I understood what that was. If I know that, why are these people that are older than me still... No. Anyway, let's talk about the politics of it. It just disgusts me. The whole thing disgusts me.
Me too. And to me, this is what's making it worse, is the politics of it. Yeah. Is the fact that literally everybody, bar the people who supported this act, has denounced it, except for Donald Trump.
Except for the president. Yep.
Except for the president of the country that this happened in.
Yep.
This blows my mind. It really does. Even he has been reportedly requested by multiple members of his staff, by multiple members of his party, by sitting politicians in his party to condemn the neo-Nazis and to condemn the KKK for this.
Yep.
And his only response was to say that there was a lot of violence on both sides. On both sides.
Yep. But one side is wearing Nazi swastika and one side isn't. And that's the difference. And absolutely... I was just about to say it's absolutely disgraceful. And it is, on Trump's behalf. But let's be honest. Is anyone surprised? No. Because the guy's a douche. He's a tool of the highest possible level. Any respect I had for Trump, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. I cannot do it with this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, everything else that he has done, I have been able to turn around and say, I understand how this helps his constituents.
Yep.
I can say, I understand how this helps the people that voted for him.
Yep.
In this case, there has been a terrorist attack on his country by a member of his country.
And nothing.
And he is not willing to even throw in solidarity with the people who have been affected. He is not even willing to throw in solidarity with the citizens of his country. No empathy whatsoever.
No.
And I say that's disgusting. That just... In fact, I'm sorry, Sean. I don't want to even discuss this anymore. I'm so
I'm done. What just on
sorry.
Trump, to take it sideways, mate, don't apologise. I completely agree with you. I don't even know. I've said it before. I don't know where to start. I really genuinely don't with this guy. I don't know with him. I don't know with the Nazi thing. I just don't understand it. It makes no sense to me at all. We should be at a point where we're beyond this. We fought a war against these people. Anyway. I was going to say with Trump, just slightly off topic still on him though, do you think Mike Pence is, all that rumour around Mike Pence getting ready to roll him? What do you think about that?
I would be very surprised if Donald Trump makes the next election.
Yep.
However, I do not see, if Mike Pence takes that presidential job, I don't see him lasting very long before the same happens to him.
I think at least with Pence, you've got somebody who understands how it works.
You've got somebody who understands the sport of politics a hell of a lot better than Trump does.
Yeah, Trump's in there to break the game. He's not there to win it.
Yes.
And I think sometimes you can go into politics with this outsider mentality that you want to change things, and that's great. But you can't change the fundamental principles of your democracy, of why it works the way it does. You can change how it works sometimes and change some of the things, but you can't change.
I do believe with Mike Pence, though, that to use a phrase that I'm been so fond of for the last few months, he's very good at the sport of politics.
Yes.
He is very good, and I believe that he will. Well, he appeals to the core Republican voter.
Yes.
As very much appeals to the religious Republican voter.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because that's what he has done his entire career. Is very much played on the religious side of Republican politics.
Yeah.
However, my question is, when Trump goes, and to be honest, it's going to be before the next election, but it's not going to be this year.
Yeah.
It's not going to be in the next year at all. Does he, to work off your analogy from before, does he kick over the game board and kick out the table legs? Does he make it so it's impossible for Mike Pence to do anything?
Yeah, I can see him being petulant enough to do that. The truth is, if Trump gets dismissed from office, it'll be similar to Nixon in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to think at some point Trump's going to go, well, at least I can get a pardon from the VP. Well, that's what, that's, nobody's ever said it, but you got to assume that's the deal between Nixon and Ford.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to go, you've got the job if you pardon me.
But in saying that, is this going to be too big to pardon for now? Is this going to be... At this point, I'm assuming that he's going to be impeached over the Russia thing.
Yeah.
Right? At this point, pretty much everyone's assuming that he's going to be impeached over Russia and the Russian ties and the allegations that Russia tampered with the US election.
Yep.
Now, in saying that, what this does lead to an opening for is that if Russia has tampered with the US election, they may be able to just throw it all up into the air and say, right, time for a brand new election. You're not eligible, and you're not eligible to Trump and Pence. Whether Pence has done anything wrong as far as any Russian intervention goes is, nobody knows. However, I would think that he would be considered by most of the voting public guilty by association.
Yeah.
And very much so by the members of the Republican Party. That's a case of, you failed to rein in this guy. That was what your job was. We wanted you there so you could rein this dude in, and you didn't do it. So, if this happens, and America takes the opportunity to have a brand new election, you're not going to see Pence again.
No, that's true. The scary part is, though, if they did run an election in the next year, who are they going to run? Either side?
Either side, Democrats are going to go with Hillary again.
You reckon?
Absolutely. As much as anybody looking from the outside with any sense could say it would be stupid to put Hillary Clinton up again, all the internal workings and machinations and politics going on inside the Democrat Party in America are all working in favor of getting Hillary up for nomination again next election.
Oh, she'll be too old by then. She'll be 72, won't she? That's starting
So?
Yeah, but that's 76 when she finishes. That's getting too old.
How old was Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, see, Sanders was too old.
But traditionally in American politics, that is the age. People like Nixon and Obama were, they were the exceptions. They weren't the rule.
And Clinton. Clinton was the youngest.
Yes.
So, although I don't know if Obama beat him with that. No, I don't know. Well, actually, I've got something for you tonight, TJ.
Yep.
I've got a very interesting thing. As you know, I'm fascinated by Cory Bernardi and his Australian Conservatives thing, so I subscribe to all of the paraphernalia and policy statements and stuff that he puts out. So he has a policy statement which, just as a side note, during the same-sex plebiscite marriage debate that we're going to discuss in a minute, he has been sort of ignoring that to a great extent and using the media to launch his policies. And he's launched a big swathe of policies at the moment. But there's one in particular I thought I'd bring to your attention. And it's called Bursting the Canberra Bubble. So let's ignore the Trumpism in that. But Bursting the Canberra Bubble. His key point is that federal government is increasingly isolated from the challenges facing ordinary Australians. The political class, which includes the media and the bureaucracy, live in a bubble in Canberra with no contact with ordinary Australians, or little contact with ordinary Australians. And so they propose a plan to burst the Canberra bubble and bring about more transparency, accountability and efficiency in government. Good Liberal words then. Transparency, accountability and efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1. Stop post-parliamentary benefits. Everyone who has... Basically, once you leave Parliament, there's no benefit except for your superannuation. And Prime Ministers... Furthermore, whilst recognising the status of the office of Prime Minister, a former Prime Minister must serve for a minimum of 4 years to be eligible for those specific prime ministerial benefits. Reform the rules on donations to political parties. Donations will only be accepted from individuals. No business, no union, only...
I don't like that one.
Only individuals.
I have a big problem with that one.
All contributions in excess of the disclosure threshold will be disclosed in real time. So it's real-time disclosure.
Yep, I'm okay with that. I like that one.
Real-time disclosure, or as close as possible, for the operating costs of political officers. So, not so much staffing costs, but, I guess like helicopter trips. Things like that,
Going to see the polo.
Yeah. A reform of the Parliament. This is the big one. This is the one that's most interesting to me. A reform of Parliament. An introduction of term limits for all politicians. And restoring the principal role of the Senate as the state's house. The Senate reform will have senators sitting in state instead of party blocks. And having no senators being able to be part of the executive government.
Can you explain that last bit?
Okay, so executive government, you would understand, you've got your parliamentary team. So at the moment, we'll talk the Liberals. You got your Liberal Party a government. You've got cabinet, which is the heads of departments. The Minister for Health and all that. Then you've got the executive government. The executive government is a constitutional unit, which is the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister. There's one or two others. Leader of the House, Leader of the Senate, maybe, something like that. Anyway, there's only 3 or 4 of them. And they are basically they're the inner sanctum of Cabinet. They can make specific laws and enact specific things outside of Cabinet and outside of parliamentary requirements. It's, for example, the executive government is what decides whether we go to war or not. In Australia. So whether you agree with that or not, that's just the way, that's the rule at the moment. So what they're saying is they don't want any senators to form part of the executive government because the executive government, the senators should be about their states and not so much about the parties. He also wants constitutional reform to resolve deadlocks without recourse to a double dissolution. So, that's fair enough. What do you think of term limits?
In theory, I am for term limits. My issue that I have with them, though, is could it potentially lead to a more American system where it's very easy for business to buy politicians? Now,
Well, has he cut that Has he undermined that by saying that only individuals can contribute?
No. To me, that's the worst part. To me, that's the part that absolutely makes it, that doubles down on it. Because here's the thing. If you say that groups such as unions can't donate money, I have no problem with them saying businesses can't donate. Because
businesses can't donate, you can't have unions donate. Because you're unbalancing the political donation system of Australia. Because businesses donate to the right and the unions prop up the left.
But the problem is individuals. The individuals that have money are the ones that prop up the right too.
Yeah, but why have they got money? No. Look, I see your point. I'm not saying I agree with it or not, but I just I don't know. I have an objection to term limits on a philosophical level. I think term limits are limiting democracy. I think it's at the end of the day. I think, for example, if the US didn't have term limits on the president, we wouldn't have had Bush, because Clinton would have won a third term.
Absolutely.
So
I think that we wouldn't have had Trump either for that reason.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah,
because Obama would have absolutely won a third term.
Well, you see, I reckon it all changes if you start the ball rolling at Clinton. Clinton wins a third term. Obama might not have run the next time. Could have been someone completely different.
That is possible.
We might not have had Obama. So, it's. I mean, they're all hypotheticals, but if we started at Obama, I agree, we would have had Obama third term. So
absolutely. But
I do miss Joe.
I miss Joe too. We all miss Joe. We all miss Biden.
Yeah.
I miss the memes.
Yeah, exactly.
As a grown-ass man, I can't believe I just said that. But that's anyway, right. I think with term limits, I'm cautious about them. I believe that there's potentially something, a good outcome that could come from them. Because, I mean, if you look at America's system right now, where they've had senators who've been representatives of their state for 30 plus years.
Yep.
And so no progress has happened in their state.
Yeah.
And it scares me that the same sort of thing could Australia could slide that way very easily.
Well, the other argument against term limits is that it gives you the opportunity to grow as a member of parliament and learn
absolutely
how to be a better politician.
Absolutely. And there is, if you were to take any other job as an example, any other career path, a carpenter, for instance, who has worked for 5 years is not going to be as good a carpenter as a carpenter who's worked for 20 years.
Exactly.
On average.
Yeah, balancing things out, yeah. Absolutely.
The ability to be able to get better at your job over time is something that term limits fights. Yeah. But you brought up how he's released this during the same-sex marriage discussion that's going on right now.
Yes.
And that is a very interesting tactic that he stayed quiet about it. However, in saying that, it's the Australian Conservative Party. He doesn't need to say anything.
Exactly. People already know where he stands, so why bother wasting the breath on it? So.
Absolutely. All he can do as a member of the Australian Conservative Party is if he opens his mouth to discuss it, all he can do is potentially drive away voters.
Yeah.
At the moment, the Conservative voting base is assuming that he is going to be this way inclined.
Yep.
If he opens his mouth and it is not 100% the way that each particular voter has already assumed, he runs the risk of alienating them. Anyway, speaking of the same-sex marriage discussion right now, it's been announced that we are going to have a postal plebiscite. It is non-binary. Oh, it is ridiculous. It is. We are both on different sides of the argument, and we both think that it's ridiculous. In fact, it was Turnbull himself was discussing a few years ago exactly how bad postal plebiscites are.
Yeah.
And I can't find the quote for the life of me. I spent about half an hour before recording this trying to find it, but I couldn't find it again. But it was just very disappointing. This isn't going to solve anything. This is going to cost the country $110 million.
I don't buy the money argument. I don't care that it costs $110 million, to be perfectly honest, because we have $1 trillion economy. That's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the country.
But there are better places for that.
There's always better places to spend it, but at the end of the day, this is an issue that will not go away. So,
but this issue is not going to go away until the yes vote wins.
Yeah, that's right. Because the yes vote will not take no for an answer.
Absolutely.
Even though it's been put up to Parliament 20 times since 2007 and been voted against 4 times, it's still being pushed.
There are certain things, though, that need to continue to be pushed, and human rights and equality is part of that.
I don't think it's a human right, but okay. It's actually a human right that every child should have a father and a mother, and that's in the UN Convention of Human Rights. Is
it?
Yeah.
I would actually very much like to see that. I have not seen that in there. And I'm not saying that you're lying. No. I'm saying I would actually very much like to read that. I believe, though, it's, again, in the case of that, as also with the definition of a man and a woman, it needs to be updated to reflect society today, where, the quote-unquote traditional, the nuclear family is no longer the only option. When these definitions were made, being gay was something that you weren't allowed to be. If you were gay, you kept your mouth shut about it.
Yeah, well,
and you lived in fear.
1989 in Queensland.
Yeah, and it was a sad.
Not that long ago, really, is it?
Yeah.
Think about that. It's really not that long ago.
Absolutely.
Just thought about that. Yeah.
I grew up. I'm 34. I was born in '83, and I grew up
old.
In the '90s, where if you were gay, you were basically sectioned off from the rest of society. You lived in predominantly gay neighborhoods. You didn't hang out with straight people. Your social circle was expected to go. You were expected to go hang out with the other gay people.
Yeah, yeah.
And to see just how far we've come in that sense, you look at the Pride Parade in Sydney. It was traditionally oh God, look at them doing their thing again. To now it is celebrated and it's attended by straight people.
Yeah.
And people go, this is awesome that this is happening. So the last lot of polling for same-sex marriage, for marriage equality, however you want to call it, has put over 70% of Australia as for it.
I don't believe that. And that's the issue, and me not believing that is actually the issue with the reason that the Liberals said that they'd go to a plebiscite. I think because I think genuinely in the no camp, a lot of people don't believe that polling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, genuinely, I don't believe polling as a general rule. And I think I've been proved right in that belief over the last few weird-ass elections that we've had with the polling. I think that's the reason it's gone to a plebiscite. I hate the fact, though, that it's a postal ballot. Because whichever side wins doesn't matter. Because nobody's going to accept that it's a legitimate ballot.
Exactly. And that's why I believe that it was eventually done as a postal ballot.
Well, I don't, if it was done by the Labor Party. It was supposedly for same-sex marriage. So, I mean, Labor Party just had to vote for the plebiscite.
That's the thing. Like, the Labor Party does not want any form of plebiscite.
Well, the Labor Party don't want an argument about it, and this is a major issue. Nobody on the same-sex marriage side actually wants to discuss it. They don't want a conversation.
Do you understand the reason behind that, though?
I understand. I don't agree, but I understand what they're saying. I don't think it's right.
But the problem is, it's like, the people who are on the no side, right? They're not going to be the people who are having what is a core part of who they are debated. They're not the people who are going to have their children in schools, or even forbid God forbid the young person who is just realizing that they're gay in early high school, having to be bombarded from all sides with listening to people say, no, it's wrong, you're disgusting, this shouldn't happen, you don't deserve.
That is such a vocal minority of the argument coming from the no camp. Any reasoned look at the arguments from both sides, the vitriol is only really coming from the left, is only really coming out of the left camp by saying, no, we're not arguing about this, we're not talking about this, we're right, that's the end of it, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you need to shut up, we don't agree with you. I mean, there's a quote that Penny Wong made in 2010, and I'm not using this against Penny Wong or the fact that she's changed her view on it, because honestly she was just parroting the party line in 2010. But she says that on the issue of marriage, I think the reality is there's a cultural, religious, historical view around that which we have to respect. That's what she said in the Senate. Absolutely. But now there is no respect from the yes camp, and these are broad generalizations, of course, but there's no respect from the yes camp to the fact that there is a reality of a cultural, religious, and historic view of a lot of people. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that it should be a nasty debate. I'm not saying anything that you said there that is right or it should be said, because it shouldn't. Absolutely not. But you can still discuss something in a rational, reasoned way, like we do every fortnight on this. You know, when we have a disagreement about something, you can discuss that in a reasonable, in a rational way. But you cannot do that in this country at the moment. You are not allowed. If you are a no camp, you are not allowed to say that. I don't feel that what Penny Wong said in 2010 is respected by the other side, even if you don't agree with it, even if the yes side don't agree with it. And that's why Labor locked down not doing it. And I just think I don't think this is something, when you are changing something as fundamental as marriage in society, I think people should get a vote on that.
Well, you see, my viewpoint on this is that it's not changing.
Well, it is.
It's not. It's changing, but it's not taking away, right? Like when people use the word, it is changing the definition. It is always said. The word changing is said with a how would you say, almost a hidden message of they're taking away one bit to add to another.
Okay,
right?
That's what you mean. Yeah.
With a subtext.
Yep.
Right? But that's not what the case is. Yes, it's changing, but it's just adding to. It's not.
On the other side of the coin, you could say it's diluting.
But it's not diluting. You, with your opposite gender partner, still have just as much love, and you still have just as many legal rights. And that's where all of this comes.
You can't argue the legal point. There is no legal difference between.
Actually, there is.
Well, there's not.
There
not
absolutely
in
is.
No,
yes, in
the
Australia,
Rudd government
there
changed it all.
absolutely is. There are. Okay, so same-sex civil unions are currently under the same grouping as de facto relationships.
Yeah.
And there actually are differences. There are differences with medical rights when it comes to comas and power of attorney. Power of attorney. Geez, that's something I'd like.
That sounds cool.
But there's also laws in regards to the possession of body after death, and differences in law in regards to estate after death. And these are three of the big ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where with a marriage, under Australian law, if you were to pass, right? Say if you were to go into a coma or you were to pass, the first person with rights is your partner, your wife. But if something was to happen to you, Sean, your partner would be the first. Your wife would be the first person who has to make decisions to take you off life support or to, ignore you or do not resuscitate order or anything like that. However, in the case of a civil union or de facto relationship, that goes to immediate family first. That goes to parents, and then to siblings, and then to children, and then to grandparents, and then only after blood relatives have been exhausted, then does it go to the civil partner.
Okay. Look, maybe I'm wrong, I didn't think I was, but if that's the case, why don't we change those laws?
Why don't we just amalgamate them all? Because and yes, I know, I understand what you're saying, but there is also, it comes down to separate but equal.
Yeah.
It comes down to separate but equal. I mean, if you're saying that, play devil's advocate here, and this is very much an extreme example, but why don't, if you're in America, why not just keep two separate sets of water fountains? To me, and to a lot of the people who are on the yes vote. And look, in saying this, here's a disclaimer. Yes, I am on the left. I am very much in favour of marriage equality. But in saying that, look, if you do so strongly believe that, a no vote is what you want to give, you should go out there and absolutely put a no vote in.
As long as I don't talk about it in public.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's not what you're saying.
As long as you're not attacking people.
That's the point I'm making. Why can't we have a national debate on something as fundamental as this, when we've obviously got two
Because when you're having that debate, you are non-verbally telling these young people who are already going through so much hate and such a hard time that they're not legitimate, that there's a possibility they're not legitimate. You're opening
the only people saying that are the people on the left. That the right are saying that, and we're not, as a general rule.
You're not saying that. You're not saying that in those words. But but just the very existence of that there has to be a debate about this implies it.
And how much better will they feel when if it's 70%, it's proved right?
Because what this does is legitimize us having arguments against it.
What this does is legitimise the result. It's not a legitimate result if 150 people vote for it.
It is.
No, it's not.
It's absolutely, by that logic.
Because if 150 people vote for it, if 150 people vote for it, they can vote against it next time.
Mm-hmm.
And they can vote against it again. They can change it again. And they can change it back and again and back and again and back, depending on who gets voted in. But if it goes to a national poll, no government is going to go, well, 70% of the people agree with us, but we're going to re-legislate against it.
I absolutely reckon that no matter whether this comes out yes or no, the current government, the current Liberal National government, does not legislate, even if it comes out with a 95% yes. They do not legislate.
It will be a private member's bill.
They take a plebiscite or a referendum to the next election.
And they'll get tossed. And they'll get tossed hard.
Honestly, I'm at the point I think they're getting tossed hard anyway the next election.
Yeah, absolutely. If Bill Shorten's the preferred Prime Minister, they're getting, there's something wrong with the government.
Oh, absolutely. I'll tell you what I would like to do is, you want to talk about debate. I'd like to open this up to our listeners.
Sure.
I would like to open this up to all of our listeners where I want to hear your reasons for no. Because as I was talking to a friend of mine who the other night, who is a devout Catholic, who is a long-time Liberal voter who is moving to vote for the Conservative Party.
Mm-hmm.
And we were discussing this, and he was asking me, because he doesn't know which way he wants to vote.
Mm.
So he was asking me what I thought about it. And I was telling him that I've sat down and gone through the logic of all of the arguments that I've heard against it, and found that all of them, to my argument, well, to my thoughts, all of them they have all been lacking in logic in various ways. You know, the thought of dilution, to me, doesn't work because it's not lessening anybody else's. It's not lessening opposite gender marriage. The thought of, because the Bible says so, it doesn't work for me because we don't put religion into law. Because if you put Christian religion into law, now in 2017, regardless of what was in the past, if you put a Christian religious thing into law right now, you are setting a precedent for 50, 60 years in the future for an Islamic person, for an Islamic law to become part of law, or a Buddhist.
I'd say 20 years, but yeah.
But, you know, that's what I'm saying, though. This is, if you were to do that, this would be precedent for any other religion. And I can guarantee you, judging from all the commonalities I'm seeing on social media from the people who are against same-sex marriage, a lot of them seem to be super against even the remotest possibility of Sharia law. So if you use the Bible as a reason, or any religious reasoning, you are creating a precedent to allow future religious things to be put into law, and they're not always going to be your religion.
While I agree that we shouldn't impose religion, enshrine in religion in law, people's religious beliefs, just like people's philosophical or cultural beliefs, are the reason that they think things. And it is always going to form part of an individual's decision-making process.
Absolutely. But there it is up to the individual, and maybe I just have too much faith in humanity. Maybe I am too optimistic and prefer to hope for the best with people, that they would be intelligent enough to differentiate, and that people on an individual level could each say to themselves, question themselves, why do I feel this way about whatever particular topic? You know, not just same-sex marriage, but anything. You know, why do I feel this way? Is it a religious thing? Oh, it is a religious thing? Is because I'm of a certain faith? Well, can I separate it enough so that I'm not imposing my religion on other people? And maybe it's just me, but I hope that the average voter of Australia is intelligent and caring enough that they can separate the two, no matter what the topic.
Maybe. You know my faith in voters.
I am very open to the idea that perhaps my faith is misplaced at times. I've certainly seen it before, and I'm certainly going to see it again in the future. But all we can hope is that we're a little bit better each time. Anyway, that really wraps this up. I'd like to get into the same-sex marriage discussion a little bit deeper. So, what I'm asking for all our listeners is, I want you to comment on the posts, comment on our wall, explain to me, without using religion, what logic there is behind the no vote. And if you're the yes vote, I'd like you to, I invite you to do the same with Sean as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, as the only way that we can both grow as people is to have our beliefs and assumptions challenged. And that's what I love, that's what I've loved about since we started this, is I get to talk to listeners, and a lot of the time it's not even on the social media, it's people stop and talk to me in public about things. And I love it. I get to have these wonderful discussions and intelligent debates with people, and I get to hear logic and reasoning behind things. And so we invite you to do these things. They make us better. We hope that it makes you better too by, we hope that it helps you grow as well by questioning your beliefs, because it does that for us. But anyway, we're going to call it here for for this episode. It's run on a little bit longer than we wanted to.
That's all right.
Hey, that seems to happen to us a lot. We are, how is it, addicted to context.
Yep.
As Dan Carlin would say. So, as always, you know where to find us on Twitter. You know where to find us on Facebook. Look for AustrAlien Podcast. That's alien spelt like the things coming from the sky one day. Maybe. If they exist.
We'll have a referendum on that too.
We'll have a non-binding post on the site.
Yeah.
All right. As always, my name's TJ. With me is the voice of the people, Sean.